Good evening, everyone. Welcome to world's biggest mommies community. And today yet again, we are coming with another episode on positive parenting. The name is Positive Parenting, and I am Kussum Shah, Child Parent Connection Coach. So today our guest is Aarti, and let me introduce Aarti to you first. Aarti is a passionate domestic abuse coach. She has worked for over a decade and a half in the corporate sector as a management consultant and served several local and international clients in this role. Her double masters from a foreign university gave her tools for a career, but her personal experience gave her tools for life. And she herself has gone through a bad abusive marriage, and on her healing journey, she has found herself and her life's purpose. Vehemently advocating the word survivor over victim, Aarti is now on a mission to heal survivors of domestic abuse while developing their courage and clarity. Aarti feels gratified to see survivors transition from toxic relationships while supporting them to shape a future of their choice. Hi Aarti, welcome to the show.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. All right, Aarti. So, first of all, just let me know, since you are a passionate domestic abuse coach, what should we teach our children, related to domestic violence?
Okay. So first of all, Kusum, thank you so much. Gratitude that you invited me to the largest world's moms platform this evening for discussion on a very sensitive but important topic. And to answer your question, I think there are a lot of things that can be taught to a child depending on their age about the abusive environment. But two top things that come to my mind to be able to handle a child in an immediate action point is number one, explain to the child that it is not their fault. Okay? The child's brain, whatever their age may be, and I'm assuming we're talking about younger children to begin with, and even in the teenage years, a child does not voluntarily want to get exposed to abuse or witness abuse. So, assuming that we're talking about children of any age, just explain to them that it is not their fault that they are witnessing all of this and they don't need to feel scared and fearful of it. While it is easy to say, it is difficult to imbibe in them. So, this has to be a continuous process. The second big point in handling the child during the abuse that may be happening as a pattern is to explain to them that there is communication always possible. So again, assuming that the abuser is not going to take the responsibility of that, because in the first place, the abuse might have not happened if they had even thought about all this. So if the abused person or the survivor is taking the responsibility of handling the environment as well, that is basically the children, then the abused person has to make the communication with the child that relationships sometimes can go wrong.
Absolutely. And
While
you were saying
abuse
that
is not acceptable, while abuse is not acceptable, clearly it is not their fault, and encourage them to talk to you, encourage them to communicate back with you on a continuous basis about how they feel when they witness the situation.
yes, it's very
And
important.
then do a plug and play of what is possible in terms of seeking therapy for them, or getting them out a little more with their friends, or seeking support from school. There could be a lot of possibilities, but because charity begins at home, it is the abused person or the survivor who needs to take the responsibility of telling the child it is not their fault and continue to communicate with them.
Absolutely. And like you were saying that you have to talk to the abuser in a quiet place also. No?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so parents are called the role models of children, and it's rightly said that children don't listen, but they imitate, right? How can they become a role model for their children? Like I'm talking about the survivors, okay? So how can they become the role model? What should they do that they become the role model for their children as well?
I personally love this question, Kusum. And I'll start with this. There is a quote that I have been reading off and on, and I don't know who the author of this is, but they've said, heal before you have children, so that the child does not have to heal from having you as a parent.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Beautiful it is.
And to me, this is an extremely profound statement. I carry forward my personal experience on this as well as I'm vehemently advocating this. There is a reason. In a lot of cultural context,
Right.
we feel that when the children come, the abuse will get fixed, the abuser will change. We have a lot of assumptions around bearing children. So, the one thing I would want to say is that take 100% responsibility of the situation that you are in and not make
Absolutely.
the child an excuse to resolve the situation that you are in.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful
And
across.
just to layer that up, it's not about raising children well. It's not about the child that's in front of you. It's really about the unborn child as well. So while
Yes.
it may be hard to defer a childbearing decision, it probably might be a good decision in the interest of the unborn child. So I go
Beautifully
right
said.
back to the fetus when I think of this question.
Yes. Yes. So beautifully you put it across, actually. That's so true. You know?
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, Arti. So the setback of an abusive marriage, a messy divorce, and resultant trauma have been changing experiences for you, right, in your own life. So being a financially independent woman, do you think it helped you come out of it faster?
Okay, so Kusum, when I was going through the abuse, I was surviving the abuse, and when I was separated, and after and during my court proceedings as well. So there was abuse during marriage, and there was abuse after separation as
Oh,
well.
oh my God.
Through this entire process, for most years, I was not in a financially sound situation.
Okay.
In fact, my situation was somewhere in between jobs, and because of the trauma that I was going through, I ended up even barring the good things that may have possibly come my way, including job offers. So, for a longish time in that period, I was actually not financially independent. I dug into my savings to restart my life. And then I slowly but surely became financially independent. But very broadly speaking, it's taken me almost a decade to get to where I am, both
Oh,
emotionally and financially, to restart my life.
right, right.
So I don't know if that helps, but I was not really financially independent at that time. So could you
Okay.
please repeat the second part of your question?
Yeah, so my question was, I mean, anybody who is financially independent, okay? Any women who is financially independent, do you think it helps them to come out of it faster?
Right. So it's not mathematical. It's not a formula that if I have enough money, I can get out of a relationship very quickly. It's not as easy because if it was, then there wouldn't be abuse happening in rich families,
Absolutely.
or there wouldn't be abuse happening in places where you know that there is abuse. It's brushed away under the carpet. There is enough money. Then why is abuse happening? So you see, there is no correlation there, but
Yes.
it's a significant correlation nonetheless because a person who is financially not independent finds it hard to take that next big step if particularly they are planning to change shelter or think of how to pay for their bills going forward, even if it's for a short time. Some people just don't have the clarity.
Right.
But more than being financially independent, there are other pieces that the jigsaw has in leaving an abusive relationship. It's not just being financially independent; it's also about the community backlash. It's about the societal shame. It's about the guilt. It's actually about the responsibility of children as well, because you
Right.
have the sufferer or the survivor typically has no idea what's going to happen to their own future, so they would wonder what's going to happen to the children anyways. So they feel that no action is a good action,
Yes.
whether they're financially independent or they're not. But yes, at the end of the day, being financially independent makes it easier
Makes it
to take
easier.
any sort of decision.
Yes, yes.
Definitely.
If you're totally
Definitely it does.
dependent, then definitely it becomes really difficult with the children. How would you get out of that marriage without any finances in hand, you know? Okay, so Arti,
That's right.
do you think that a lot of people say that domestic violence comes from narcissism? Narcissism. So do you also believe in that a narcissistic person basically goes for domestic violence, or he abuses the other person?
So a narcissist, whether it's a he or a she, can not necessarily be found only in a spousal relationship. It
Yeah,
can be found in
in
any kind of relationship, but I think a lot of the times it is perceived as a spousal relationship. So let's just stick to that for the purpose of our discussion.
yeah.
If they do end up abusing and the roots are found in the patterns of behavior as being narcissist or maybe a psychopath, and there are very many different things that probably a psychologist would, but
Okay.
quite likely that a narcissist also has roots in their upbringing, and they may have witnessed behaviors like this. They may have got influenced by behaviors like this in their own childhood, and therefore the possibilities of a narcissist abusing is definitely higher.
Yes, true that, true that. All right. So, do you think women who are not financially independent, again, we are coming back to the same question, financially independent, and women who are not financially independent are more prone to domestic violence since they have no place to go along with their children, and somewhere their spouse is aware of this?
Yes, very much. So we were talking about a narcissist. So if I just take a leaf from there,
Yeah.
a narcissist will essentially have a lot of troublesome attitude, right? Gaslighting, uh, being withdrawing affection, a lot of things that would make the relationship itself very difficult to live. So it's the abuse can be in very subtle forms when it's a narcissist. So what happens is that one of the tools or weapons of the abuser is actually that financial dependence. And they, of course, being aware as one of the weaknesses of the survivor, they may make the most of it.
True.
And the moment that weapon is taken away from them, it can be, of course, a whole different ball game. But yes, this is one of the bigger reasons in your face that financial dependency creates a very good playground for a narcissist or an abuser to do what they want.
Yes, true, true. I think there's some question coming up. Do
Sure.
you think there are people who have managed to get away with abusing women since women have accepted them will continue to abuse cause no one stood up against them? So this is coming
Okay.
from Radhi Gonzi, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Radhika. That's a friend of mine. Thank you, Radhika, for that question. Um, if I can quickly understand, if I understand this correctly, we're talking about encouraging the abuser. Yeah,
Uh,
encouraging the abuser by not standing up
yes.
against the abuse. Yeah, effectively, that's what happens. That is really what happens. Why are the abusive patterns? Why is it a pattern in the first place? It's because we brushed it under the carpet first time, second time, third time. Doesn't matter what is the type of abuse we're talking about. We brush it under the carpet so often, and we have our reasons to do that. And we were going back to the reasons that it could be financial dependency, it could be even love for the abuser. It could actually be love that you start the relationship on, and then it turns into abuse slowly. So mentally, you're very confused about where this relationship is. And with patterns developing, as the survivor, one may not even realize it that the abuser is getting more and more power. So that imbalance of power is what causes that abuse.
Right.
And the only person, and I can't emphasize this enough, the only person to stand up against this is the survivor.
Totally
The
agree.
whole world can do anything to support you from the outside. But if the survivor doesn't put their foot down and start to take steps, and there are many different ways of doing it depending on what the situation of the survivor is,
Yes.
if they don't decide to take that next step, whatever they define as the next step, the abuser will continue to do what they have to and what they want to.
Yes. True that.
So yes, Radi Gonzi, if that answers your question, they do get away with it, and we have to take 100% responsibility of that.
True, true, true. Okay, so in how can the women come out of such scenario? I mean, who is again? We'll come back to the same question because I'm really concerned about this most because being a patriarchal society, it's very
Hmm.
common in India, especially to the moment the woman gets married, she has to totally concentrate, on her family, or the priority becomes the male's family or male, I mean the husband himself. Then within a couple of years she gets she gives birth to a child, and then whole concentration shifts from there to the child. What happens, and then she is put under this pressure that you have to leave your work, otherwise how will you manage? And if she's not able to manage, then she's again sabotaged by the society. This is something I have been seeing so often. That's why I'm coming back to the same question again. This is the third time I'm coming back to the same question. So my question is, in this case, how can the women come out of such scenarios so that they can raise their children in a no domestic violence zone? So,
Okay.
yeah, here definitely I would just like to say one more thing, that a lot of women think that, okay, I really love my husband and he is doing enough. Only thing is that he's abusing me. For them, it is just the only thing. They love them so much that for them it's okay. He's abusing, but he loves me a lot, and they don't even take care of the savings part also. They
Right.
don't even take care of that. Yeah. So what is your advice to the women who are totally blinded by love for their husbands no matter what?
Yes, so regardless of whether it's love or it's duty or whatever
Yeah.
things that we have been conditioned on, there is always a time in life where we need things. And the awareness of that is the first thing that one needs to recognize in a situation like that. If the awareness doesn't arise, quite possibly the next steps are going to be all the more challenging. Again, whatever next steps you define as. So, yes, the very first thing is if the individual who is surviving wants to get out of the situation with dependent children, the first thing is that, and this is more like a long term strategy for people who are either getting into relationships and I have no idea how they're going to go, but in general, even
Yes.
if the abuse is not happening, in general, keep yourself financially secure at all times. We get into relationships thinking with that twinkly, starry eyed thing that, oh, my husband or my wife is going to look after
Yeah.
me anyways financially. And then the story goes downhill. And then you realize that you don't have anything to bank upon. So that's one thing in general. In the long term, have
Aarti,
your finances secure.
I'll just interrupt
Hmm.
you here. So my dadiji, my grandmom, she always told me before my marriage only that you get married later, but first start earning.
That's
Even she knew
beautiful.
this. Yeah,
That's
she
beautiful.
knew this.
Two generations above. Yeah.
Yeah. So my point is sometimes we just don't understand what they really mean. And when we just go through the life and understand it practically with our failures, then we understand, okay, what that old lady meant then. That was so beautiful and wonderful. It's still in my head and it always
Yes.
remains.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, as much as tradition hands us patriarchy, it also hands us the wisdom to deal with it. But we, I think, make it too convenient for ourselves not to look at it in the face at the right time in our lives. So, that's one. Yes, financial independence being the key factor here. As a long term strategy for somebody who's even starting to get into relationships now, because you never know what happens. So, we're not talking about being pessimistic, but we're just talking about being your own identity. That's all there is to it to begin with. And secondly, if it is already happening in a place where the individual is financially dependent and they're thinking of their children, I think one of the things, especially from the comment that you made that it's just abuse. Everything else is okay, but it's just abuse.
Exactly. I heard
It
that.
is you're blinding yourself to what you are not, and what you're not is having the self worth, the sense of self worth, and the sense of self esteem that you could be having as an individual, but you've decided to do away with it.
Right.
So, a lot of the times, survivors may not even think about making decisions because of a lack of self worth. They have no idea that they've handed their entire identity to their matriarchal, or sorry, the married family, the marital family,
Yes, totally. And for
and
them, they
that needs
become
to
the
be
god.
revived.
The husband becomes the god totally.
Yes.
sad.
So that's the first thing that needs to be revived to change our language and change our vocabulary towards how we perceive abuse. And if the survivor themselves don't perceive abuse as abuse and something that they need to be safe from, then how are they going to save their children anyways?
True.
So you see, we need to go back to the drawing board when it comes to understanding who is the survivor, what do they think about the abuse, and whether they think of their children's future in the same way or not. And if they don't want to, nobody from the outside can intervene. You
Absolutely.
see? So, how important it is. And a lot of our trainers, if you and I are in the same industry, Kusum, a
Yeah,
lot of our trainers teach us that, and it has, internalized that find your why.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
on an everyday basis, we just need to find what is our why in this case and just think of the clarity starts coming in when you know why you are where you are. Even if you continue to be in that abusive relationship, it's ultimately your choice.
Absolutely. It's very, very important to understand your why. Okay.
Yes.
So, what are the traumas children face due to witnessing domestic violence at home? And how does it affect their overall personality in the longer run?
Okay. So, Kusum, as far as any child is concerned, we all know that the child's development typically, happens a lot from what they witness before the age of 7, and then when they start growing, they start becoming confused. So there's a lot of trauma that they can get affected by. A trauma, if they don't speak up, it stays with them in their adulthood.
Right.
And they find that they take perceptions of relationships that beating is okay, using bad words is okay, or gaslighting my mom or my dad is okay. When things become okay for them, their definition of abuse is not abuse actually. They think it is normal.
Right.
So the distinction is what they stop creating on what is a self-respecting identity versus what is abuse. And
Ab-
unfortunately, because they grow up with all of that, it impacts mainly their choice of partners in the future, and it starts affecting them in their choices of career, finances. They might even start to get underconfident. For example, if a child is interested in sports and he or she has a lot of inside frustration because of what they witness maybe on a daily basis in the house. Instead of going and playing cricket or football, the child might end up going and bullying another child on the ground because their anger is spewing out. So they might not even perform at sports. In fact, they might come back with complaints from the teachers and coaches. So it starts from there and it doesn't end because these things stick with you during the.
Okay, we had lost you for some seconds again. Yeah, yeah. Of course, these things really stick with the person, with the child.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And Aarti, how do you help survivors transit from toxic to shape a future of their choice?
Okay. So, Kusum, essentially, we were talking about self worth and self esteem. And that's what my starting point was.
Right.
And the moment I, decided what my why was and what I really wanted, I started to work on myself. And that's exactly the way I work with my coaches, my clients who are wanting to survive this with a sense of self respect and with a courage that they know they can move on. And when I say move on, we don't really forget things. But what we can do is recreate our reality.
Right.
And that's always possible. That's always possible. It just depends on the courage that you have. Now, what happens is that in the environment that the abuse happens, it doesn't allow the sufferer or the survivor to think that far, to think of
Right.
the possibilities beyond maybe another day. In fact, there is obviously a lot of negative thinking that they're shrouded with. So, the way we work together is to start finding the clarity and the courage and the confidence to take whatever next steps they want to take to live a future of their choice, which also includes working with them on their own limiting beliefs. For example, one of the things that you said, this is abuse, this is okay. I mean, First of all, being non-judgmental about their perceptions is a very important thing. Second is, if they think abuse is okay, then what is it that they really want to work on?
I'll tell you, Aarti, usually what happens, since we are mostly from metropolitan cities or maybe some capitals, we really don't understand that people coming from very small towns or maybe villages or rural backgrounds or slum, for them, it actually is this. It is just an abuse. And he loves me, he or she, The, they literally feel it this.
So, Kusum, you are right. You're very right, especially in places which have been exposed to a very high level of patriarchy, where we are conditioned to think like that. In such cases, the women won't even walk that mile to leave an abusive relationship because that's what probably they don't want.
Yes.
So, if they don't want it, it's a no-go area for us.
Yeah.
For those who want it, women or men, I've recently been talking to a gentleman, in fact, and women or men. See, emotions are the same. It's just that we look at it with a very gender-specific lens because yes, women
More
do
prone.
go through more abuse and it's reported more as well, but doesn't mean that men don't go through it,
Yes.
right? So the whole point is that if they seek out help, then there are various ways to do it,
True.
and there is a repair that we need from inside, irrespective of the support that we get from. So when I keep saying that it's a support, there could be family, there could be friends, there could be authorities like lawyers, doctors, sometimes police is involved. So many types of new entrants come into your life if you're going through, especially a messy divorce and all of that. But the whole point is, the entire focus of all of these people is usually the abuser.
True.
What I do with my clients is I turn the lens and the focus on themselves. What is it that you want? And we start with that question, and then it flows into building their courage and confidence, into building a better life for themselves. And it comes from the willingness of the person to do it.
Absolutely. That's most important. Thank you so much, Aarti. It was wonderful speaking to you and getting a lot of tips on the much. In fact, it's not even spoken. I mean, with your friends also, you don't come up with these things. And you hide there also, even in the whether it is any society, lower or to upper, any society. So, tips. Thank you so much, and it was wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you, Kusum. Thanks a lot for lending me your platform, and it was wonderful to have this chat with you as well.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.